And sometimes you just need to keep on doing it, and one day will pay off.
Is customer success look different at AI startups?
In an ideal scenario, you want to have both scaled support and bespoke support.
How are you seeing pricing being affected with AI startups?
I would recommend founders to try best to make the connection between usage or credit to the output or the actual value delivered.
What are some of the challenges you're seeing at the real early stage?
AI is such a crowded space now, and competition is fierce, so it's hard to stand out and actually grow. And two, retention. Like we all know there's lots of AI tourists and they flee quickly. Not everyone has a real need for the product, so across the board, AI product retention rate is a lot lower.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
This episode is brought to you by Demandbase. Demandbase helps B2B companies hit their revenue goals using fewer resources by using the power of AI to identify and engage the accounts and buying groups most likely to purchase. Their account-based technology unites sales and marketing teams around insights that you can understand and facilitates quick actions across systems and channels to deliver big wins. It's flexible, scalable ABM built for you. Welcome back. Welcome back to the GTM podcast. Appreciate you hanging out with us. As always, we have another rockstar guest with me. It's been super humbling and cool to see the level of our guests continue to climb. And this is no exception. I'm joined by Holly Chen. Holly, welcome.
Thank you. I love your podcast voice.
Thank you. It slightly changes. I think I'm just like in the zone a little bit more and like try and get ultra present. So it switches my voice just slightly. We've been trying to tee this up for a little while. So the suspense has been killing me, and just couldn't be more excited to have this conversation. And I'm just going to dive right into it because there is so much I want to pick your brain on. But before we get into it, I do want to do a quick bio for the listeners because I was doing some prep before this, and your background is actually insane. Like it's the who's who of SaaS, and you've been a part of so many great organizations. But currently, so Holly Chen is the managing partner of Exponential X, a marketing and growth advisory collective for high growth SaaS startups. And Holly also advises companies like Miro, Loom, ServiceNow, AppsFlyer in their growth journey. Beyond just doing that, she's also a guest lecturer at Berkeley and NYU, teaches at Section and Maven, mentors at First Round Capital, and is just a really active angel investor and advisor. And then previously, Holly was the global head of digital marketing at Slack during the time period where they went from 100 mil to 700 mil ARR, and was part of the going public journey, which is super cool. And then was also, if that wasn't enough, head of growth at Google Store, and global head of Google B2B websites, which is a very, very big role. And then, you also spent some time in sort of the B2C landscape. So you worked at Gucci, you did the consulting thing, you were at Deloitte, Kearney, and even the UN. So like such a broad swath of experience. And then in your spare time, you also run Ceiling Breakers, which is a group coaching program for underrepresented leaders. Live in San Francisco, speak fluent Chinese, and also Italian. Italian, did I get that right? How did you find time to learn Italian amongst all of that I just went through?
That was actually my undergrad major. So instead of studying marketing, I studied Italian, and there were like 24 people in the entire country who majored in Italian at the time, every 2 years. So we were a very, very small group of people.
How often do you use you're Italian. Do you go try and do an Italy trip every year, every couple years?
Every couple of years. Yeah. Trying to do that again this year.
Favorite, maybe lesser known spot in Italy?
Ooh, I really like this little town called Lucca. It's like a like old town, and it's close to Bologna and close to like in the center of the country. Great food, very easy access to lots of other places, and just you can walk in this little cobble streets and have cappuccino in their piazza, and I had a good time. And I actually met a like American couple who moved from the Bay Area to Lucca, and they really enjoy life. I was like, okay, cool. Like that's my inspiration when the time is right. So yeah, Lucca is fantastic.
You and me both. I plan to hopefully retire in Europe once this is all said and done. I feel like they just treat their elderly better overall in Europe than we do over here in North America. It just seems like a better place to grow old.
Yeah, I mean, every morning you see people at the coffee shop and the counter and get their, espresso and chat about. Yeah, so that's a really nice life.
And maybe I'll hit up Luca. I've got a wedding in Italy later in the summer, so maybe I'll do a pit stop. Other thing I wanted to quickly touch on the background before we get into everything GTM and tech and our world. Your experience at the UN. Tell me about that. How was that experience for you? What have you kind of pulled forward from that experience? I imagine it was quite impactful.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the my undergrad was in China. So studied Italian. A lot of my classmates go went into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that's sort of like that prep school for a diplomacy. And I did not want to go to that route, but instead I came to the US for a master's for European studies. But like working in international affairs has always been my dream at the time. So I decided to do an internship at the UN in the summer of grad school, and uh, it was a really rewarding experience because, for example, the project I did during that summer was to compare healthcare policies in emerging markets and development market. So, like, you look at like very broad and macro level on global policy. Um, and the intent is to provide the recommendations on like how countries should plan their healthcare policies, which is like fantastic and really rewarding. At the same time, we did this like whole project in 3 months, and finally we have this final report. And I was so excited to check out, I'll like on the bookshelf and like, oh, here's our like a white paper of months of work, and then like it just sat on the shelf. And like maybe one or two people pick it up, and I asked my advisors like how many people will act like will this actually get into the hands of policymakers, and he was like, well, maybe some academics can pick it up, and hopefully it can get into the hands of policymakers, but like our jobs pretty much stops here. Like we do our research, we put it out there, but we actually don't know like if people are actually using it. So it was a little bit of like delusional for me on well how much the research can impact actually policy making. So that was actually the reason why I changed my career aspirations from working in international affairs and diplomacy to private sector. Like I want to see the impact of my work. I want to see, okay, like I do this project and I know like 3 months later or like next day, right, in growth marketing, like I can have some impact. So that was actually a turning point for me.
I can imagine as someone who's wired similarly. I would just start losing my mind in the public sector, just like how slow moving things are and how difficult it is to affect change. It's a bit sad, really, because we lose a lot of our incredibly talented people who could have an impact over time because of that. It's a tough thing, but probably a podcast for another day. So how do we get smarter people into public service? And
Yeah, but I applaud people who stick to it. We need people to stick to it and love it and can sustain it. And I still like applaud my advisor for like keep on doing it. And sometimes you just need to keep on doing it, and one day will pay off.
no, that's super interesting. And so switching gears, then you get into, the private sector, and now all of a sudden you're able to have a big impact very quickly. All these like micro changes you make every single day in marketing have a really big impact. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. And kind of the overarching theme of this episode is really, how startups can grow from 0 to 1 and beyond. And you have immense experience in this area. And really, I think I want to focus it around AI startups. And it almost seems unnecessary to put in AI in front of startups these days. Like what we're seeing is every new software company that is being built has some sort of AI component. I don't know if they're mutually exclusive anymore. But yeah, like what are some of the challenges you're seeing at the real early stage? Because there is a lot, around differentiation and how you just claim a piece of this market that is just getting more and more crowded every day.
Absolutely. So, like you said, I would say three biggest challenges I observe in AI startups. One, like absolutely, AI is such a crowded space now, and competition is fierce. So it's hard to stand out and actually grow. And two, retention. Right? Like we all know, there's lots of AI tourists, and they flee quickly. Not everyone has a real need for the product. So across the board, AI product retention rate is a lot lower than classic SaaS. And the third thing I would say, pricing. So the traditional SaaS pricing, especially if you charge by seat, it doesn't always work for AI companies because, especially when the value prop of the product is for companies to improve efficiency and cut down that labor cost. So it almost works counter to the seat-based pricing. So I can definitely talk more about what my thoughts around those.
Yeah, let's dissect those three. So differentiation, retention rate, and pricing. And I've got a ton of questions on number three because it's just one I feel like I'm talking about every day now. It is so funny that the promise in and of itself detracts from your overall like ACV. If you're replacing labor and you're doing it by a per seat basis, you're making your price go down, which is a big problem. But let's start at number one. Hard to stand out. Differentiation is tough. A lot of people sound the same. A lot of decks I look at look the same. Like the amount of co-pilots for X I'm seeing is just absurd. Um, how do you advise folks to stand out and position themselves to be different?
I would say that for these two things, I would recommend, and I've seen companies do as big unlocks. One is to start with a strong brand, and two is to paint the concrete picture of use cases. So what I mean by start with the brand. So having a look and feel and brand language that is distinct from other brands. You don't want to look like yet another B2B SaaS brand, right? Like I'll give you an example. One of my clients is in the AI video space, very crowded. The original brand was just like any other SaaS brand, blue and white, clean lines, and brand video that looks like a screen recording. So like very tech driven. And they realize the importance of brand and to stand out from a very crowded space. So we work together on a new brand that's elegant, approachable, has a unique color and font and language and feels premium. And it made them look a lot bigger than they actually were. So since they launched the new brand in 6 months, the sign up rate from like visit to sign up grew 25%, and their new visit grew 2,500%. So it was like really fast growth. It made a lot easier also to get a response from partners and influencer to work with them, because previously very few people was even responding to their outreach. It's like they were like, oh, we want to work with you, like no one was actually responding to them, and it was a very obvious trigger and bench and milestone. And so they went from an unknown player to now as the fastest growing solution in their category. So, but of course, they did a lot of other things right, like a good product and a good growth strategy. But the rebrand was a big unlock and milestone for them.
That's super interesting and hasn't always traditionally been the case, right? I think brand for startups was like almost a luxury that comes later. Once we've proven, once we've got to, a million ARR, that's when we'll, focus on brand. And what I'm hearing you saying is like that's starting earlier now. Like you need to from day one be very, very intentional with your brand and your perception. What was sort of that branding exercise? Like can you break it down? Like I'm a founder, I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, my logo is blue, clean lines, exactly what Holly's describing. Like, how do I go through a branding exercise to find something that might have the same impact that you were describing?
The first step I would take is to look into competitors in your space. Like, what's their visual language look like? And do you feel like how distinctive are you with the competitors in the space? Not only direct competitors, but related competitor that's bigger, that eventually you may want to get into. So even from like a small thing like your color scheme, like you want to be distinctive, and so one day when you are competing head to head to them, there is like a distinctive language. I would say also, like, think about what message you want to convey to the audience. The emotion that your brand is conveying to the audience, is that the type of emotion or feeling that you want to generate? Yes, for a dev tool, right? Like it makes perfect sense to feel like tech forward and futuristic. But if you're building, let's say, a creator tool, or if you're building an SMB tool, then you want that tool to feel approachable to that particular audience. So maybe run some like a user feedback session and just see what feedback you get.
Great stuff. Yeah, survey the competitive landscape. Uh, Dive into kind of that emotion, that feeling. I love how you described sort of visual language. This is your visual positioning and messaging. It's awesome. And then the second piece to that was getting very crystal clear on use cases. Talk me through how you've seen that done well.
Building use cases and building concrete pictures of how to use the AI tool is especially important if you're building a AI product for the non-tech audience, right? Of course, if you're building infrastructure and based like the foundational LLMs, it's another story. But if you're building applications, you need to paint the picture for the user about exactly how they can use the technology, rather than hoping your users will figure it out. Yes, there are makers and tinkers out there who will figure out creative ways to adopt your product, of course, but the majority of the audience will appreciate specific use cases, examples, and concrete pictures of how they can use your product. For example, one of my clients is actually a no-code AI chat platform. Right? Yes, Scott, you probably know what that means. But a SMB customer, like a dentist office or like a school admin, the audience they're targeting, right? They have no idea what is a no-code AI chatbot platform. so, so they're building a big library of templates and use cases, and these use cases all address existing pain points and actual real life scenarios and all the things that people would already look for, search for. So, for example, right, like customer service bot or doctor office reservation tool, right? Those are things that people already are looking for, and this template will make the picture more concrete for them. So that was a big unlock for them.
That's big. It's almost like strip away the AI. No one actually cares that you're using AI, specifically if you're not a technical buyer. Like dentists, they don't care. They want their problem solved and they want X to be more efficient. And, I think just stripping that away, I think it's something that we fall prey to all the time. I think of like blockchain technology when it first came out, and even like, you know, the internet and mobile. Everyone was like so obsessed with the technology that they got away from what is the actual problem that we are solving and focusing on that and getting really specific with that. And I think artificial intelligence poses an even bigger problem than the past because it can do so much for there is so many ways to use it, even in a fairly simple app. And, I even hear a lot of founders pitching and they're like, oh, we can do everything. And it's like, okay, but do you know how confusing that is as an investor and then as a buyer who's going to actually buy your product? So I love this idea of getting hyper specific.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think the fear of founder is to miss out, right? Like they want to capture the entire market. They don't want to be pigeonholed, especially if they're building a horizontal product that can be used by a lot of different verticals. So they want to remain neutral, which is totally understandable. But at the beginning, we're talking about 0 to 1, right? You can't serve the entirety of market of everyone who's looking for an AI solution. And you do want to use your unique differentiator to find the first group of like the people who's like leading the chasm, the pioneers in like using your product. You need to paint that picture so that these people know, oh, this is how I can use. So if more people can like have a concrete idea in their mind of like how to solve their specific problem, yes, you can probably go after like the top 3 use cases and own that specific market first while still have your horizontal platform messaging. So this is actually a good point of how you think about messaging and positioning, because there's a difference between what you say on your website and what you say in your sales, and how you target in your sales outbounding. And there's you know how users can use. What I've seen in a lot of horizontal products, there are typically some sort of focus or primary ICP, right? So in the case of Slack, right, initially the engineers, and then it's the product managers, and then it's the go-to-market team. But of course, today Slack is used by everyone, all knowledge workers. But we know from the very beginning, it's the engineers who like first adopted. And very similarly, a tool like a Miro or Loom, like we know it's the product managers, the designers, the engineers who like use these tools more intensively, have more retention and more willingness to buy versus some other profiles. On our website, we would have all the roles you have your marketer page, you have your sales page, you have your customer success page, you have your engineer page. Yes, you want to present all of the profiles, but in actual, sales outbounding, in actual sales conversations, it may be different. Maybe you will go after, that engineering leader if you know that engineering leader has the most budget or ability to pay and a willingness to pay. So there is a bit of a like execution wise, you want to architect who you are targeting and how you talk to your audiences.
In your experience, is there a best practice on when you're really early stage, we're talking 0 to 1, how many personas you should target, and then maybe how many use cases you can present without confusing the market?
Great question. I think the rule of three. I love the rule of three. Typically, what I do is to look into one, the existing customers. Look into if you already have some existing customers. Not every like 0 to 1 startups have it. So you may need to rely on more of the qualitative customer interviews. But if you have some customers, and look into among these people, which segment convert higher or more willingness to convert from like free to paid, and or have higher ACVs. So you would pick your top three and start with those top three and run it for a while and then expand. I would say from a role perspective, typically that is a good place to start. From industry perspective, it really depends on the product itself. I've seen products that can be used by like a 30 different industries, but there is a bit of like ordering that you can, like a priority order that you can do. So start with like 3 5 and then expand from there.
Rule of 3 is always a good one to anchor on. Okay, I want to move quickly to retention rate. Again, a big one. This is something I see in a lot of categories of SaaS right now. Kind of what's happening, and you can tell me if you're seeing the same, is we have these larger incumbents that still have a lot of money. They usually raise big rounds, maybe 2020, 2021, and they weren't being overly innovative for a while. And so customers got frustrated. And then they saw all these AI startups pop up. And the customers like, wow, innovation. And then they went out and adopted these AI platforms. It was usually pretty low barrier to entry. It was like PLG or very low ACVs. So there was very little risk to them. They take it, they like it, and then the first sort of QBR, or first chance that they get to talk to their incumbent provider that they're spending a lot of money on, they're saying, hey, we're using this, is this on your roadmap, like when is this coming? And they're almost like giving them all this information. And then I think we're in the phase right now where the incumbents are actively like really building. And then what happens to those startups? Well, there's going to be a lot of churn, and we're seeing that happen. Is there a way to defend against that? And are you seeing similar things from your point of view?
Oh, absolutely. For like really like AI companies with even an okay product, getting the traffic from 0 to 1 seems like it's really easy. There's Twitter, that's like every AI founder or like a CFCS is on there. There's newsletters, right? AI newsletters, like AI Secret has like 500K readers, and they're influencers and like organic and paid channels. So like if you are painting a good enough of a picture and a promise, many people will say, oh yeah, like I'll give it a try. But keeping those what I call like AI tourists is like a lot harder because many of them don't actually have a real need, or more importantly, the sustained need for the product, right? Is the toothbrush test. Is like, is this something that I would use every single day in a sustained basis? And I'm willing to pay for it. Like my pain is big enough that I'm willing to pay for it. So you know, this is maybe preaching to the choirs. What I would suggest is for AI startup founders to think really hard about the audience you're building for. Yes, consumer audience can have tons of traffic, users, even revenue in the short term, but servicing B2B customers can typically drive a higher price, better margin, a higher retention. They can afford more. It's more critical need versus the tinkerer audience. An example I give is Heijen. Right? Heijen is a AI video generator who went from 0 to 1 million AR in 7 months, and who worked with one of our advisors in the collective. Heijen founders came from a consumer background, and after conducting hundreds of interviews, and they actually transitioned from B2C to B2B, and now they're even hiring a sales team. So thinking about like how do you transition from a prosumer and consumer audience maybe from the beginning to get those PLG motion up, but pretty quickly think about what is the unique value you can provide to B2B customers.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. And then how are you advising folks to think about customer success? Like it feels like that's changing quite a bit and there's a renewed focus on customer success. And sometimes again in the 0 to 1 journey we get very obsessed with net new logos. That makes it easier to fundraise and everything. um is customer success look different at AI startups?
What I see is like probably a range of situations that may not be that different from a classic B2B company. Granted, a lot of the customer success function at early stage SaaS companies is a glorified customer support function. It's like if the tool cannot do something that the customer wants, and then the customer success team actually manually do it for them. And I've seen a lot of examples of those. Um, so they're almost like a gap between the actual functionality and what the customer needs. In ideal scenario, you want to have both scaled support and bespoke support. So for a lot of the PLG audience, scaled support or CS function that helps these people to get to value as soon as possible. Maybe more in the format of a you know onboarding flow or a webinar for new users or educational courses and information. Those are more like a skilled effort, and email support and chat support, etc., versus a bespoke support, more premium support for paid customers or enterprise customers is I would say like that's a typical structure for any POG product and POG going up market to PLS sort of model. And honestly, I think for AI companies is very similar. Yeah, I haven't seen like a huge difference in the CS function just yet. If anything, I would say some of my clients are really using CS as the education arm. They're literally holding hands of their new users and new customers because they haven't done a really good job at painting that concrete picture in the first place. So they almost have to brainstorm with their customers on like how exactly they can use the tool.
Yeah, it feels like CS, yeah, they're almost becoming teachers, educators, and especially because, there's just everything is so new to everyone that everyone's trying to figure it out. Everyone's looking for an expert, and I think we're leaning more on CS to hopefully be the ones with the answers, not just on the product, but where we're going in a specific category in general.
Actually, as we're talking about it, so I have a theory that the AI company's CS team is almost a like professional services consultants. Like I would totally see a CS team as a like a revenue generating function where yes, you can have your normal like CS support, but if you want more support in like, oh, help me brainstorm how to use this technology, or what's the best practices of using AI to transform my marketing function? Or how can I make the connection between different workflows? And if I want a like more custom solution that you design for me, yeah, so like a charge for that CS function and charge for that professional service and functional expertise. And I do think that could be like a really interesting value add for AI customers.
People seem to be willing to pay for it. You called out some of these content platforms, courses, like AI courses are going crazy. And so if you can position yourself as a team of experts, I think people would take you up on that. So I like that a lot. Final pillar that I wanted to discuss on this topic is pricing. We touched on it early, but how are you seeing pricing being affected with AI startups?
Yeah, like we said, the seat-based pricing goes against the innate value that AI tool provides, right? Like it should cut down people costs. So usage-based pricing should be a better way to make a more direct connection. So, a lot of them use a credit system, 1,000 credit or tokens for X dollars. But it can also be hard for customers to understand, okay, what does that 1,000 credit represent? Right? How do I actually estimate my eventual usage? What if it gets too expensive too quickly? And that's a challenge for companies like Snowflake, and right, that it can be the bill can stack up really quickly. So I would recommend founders to try best to make the connection between usage or credit to the output or the actual value delivered. For example, with 1,000 tokens is about 100 photos generated, or like 1,000 minutes of video processed, or something that's tangible that speaks to the customers and easier for them to connect to the actual value.
Use a credit or token system, but then paint a picture of what the output or outcome those credits. So let's say 1,000 tokens. Usually, if your AI legal is 20 contracts that we will generate for you, or something like that. I think
Exactly.
that's,
Yep.
yeah, makes it super tangible, and then easy for the buyer to understand. Okay, well, we need X amount of outcomes or outputs. I can walk into my bill, and you can also see, okay, as this scales. I think that's great. That's a really good one, and I feel like yeah, that's just a good way to position pricing anyway. Even if you're doing, per seat, it's like, per 100 seats, usually we see an outcome of, X. Here's the ROI on those, which, yeah, seems simple, but certainly not always done. Um, all right. I wanted to shift gears a little bit as we sort of wrap up, and these always fly by. But we have a great listener question that I would love your take on. And, you've been at, arguably the most successful kind of PLG companies on the planet with Slack and Miro and Loom. And so this is right up your wheelhouse. We're debating spinning up a PLG offering. What should we consider before going down this path? So assuming they didn't initially start as PLG, probably sales led motion, and now they're getting tantalized by the idea of PLG or freemium. What should they consider?
That is such a great question. I I would say, like, especially in the last couple of years with um the PLG hype, every single SaaS founder wants to do PLG regardless whether they are actually a fit for PLG. Like, not every company is a good fit for PLG. Like the product that is easy to understand, easy to learn, and have a large potential use base, yes, it's a good fit for PLG. But if you're building something that requires a high barrier of entry, like you need access to your internal HR system. You need some IT approval on privacy of your data in order to connect to your internal data warehouse. Like things like those are really hard to actually do PLG. So I would recommend the founder to first investigate how easy is it to actually access the product, or is the product a fit for PLG? So that's like a foundational layer that I think is missing in a lot of discussions. And two is transitioning from SLG to PLG. There are very few success examples because it's such a huge transition. You almost have to change the entire company and how you go to market, how your organization is structured in order to make that happen. A very obvious example is, well, now where do your sales team getting leads, right? So if I'm getting part of my website traffic to PLG flow, are we aligned with our sales function that your leads are gonna be cut in half? Or your SQLs is probably gonna cut in like a quarter at least, right? So how do we feel about that? Of course, there's an argument that these PLG users can grow into higher value PQLs and bigger deals and this higher win rate, but like the architecting of that entire process will take some time, and there will be voices within the organization to question that every single day, especially from a revenue team. So, and that makes it really hard to actually actually architect like what kind of people do we want to send to PLG, what kind of people do we want to send to the sales team, and what if there's overlap, and what if there is like stuff that's missing. So that's second, which is architecting the actual go to market. Um, and all of that being said, yes, you've done your assessment or you've done your assessment. You've agreed as a company that this is a priority. I would say like spin up a tiger team to try it out. The to try out the PLG as a almost like a standalone product team or standalone BU to try it out first before you change the entire company to PLG. Like one great example is, the Equals founder, right? Like he posted, well, we changed the company from SLG to PLG and actually like revenue tanked. Of course, because you require access to internal data warehouse and in order to use their product. So of course, like PLG is not going to work for their target audience. So in this case, can this like will this founder actually create a separate product that's different from their existing core offering? Or is it just another entry point to their existing offering? So that also has a difference in how they would architect it, I would say.
It sounds like you're telling this listener to use caution first and foremost. Like this is a huge, org-wide kind of DNA shift. So make sure that you're slowing down, investigating thoroughly, making sure that your product is easy to understand, easy to use, easy to get onboarded, and you have a large enough TAM to support this. And then if it passes that lens, think about starting like a small tiger team. Don't boil the ocean right away. Test it in kind of a more closed off environment. I think that's all fantastic advice. Well, I have two more questions for you, and this has been super fun. So thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. This question I always keep the same. It is intentionally vague, and the question is, what is one widely held belief that revenue leaders hold today that you think is bullshit or no longer true?
I wouldn't call it BS, but I do observe how companies work with advisors is changing. So, previously advisors are considered as something that semi-retired executives do, right? Like you mostly stay on a very high level, you talk about strategy, long-term, or just leverage the advisor's credibility to be able to say, so-and-so is our advisor, right? And it's mostly used by founders or CEO, very rarely by the revenue leaders themselves. And I would say like demand more from your advisors. And yes, there are still strategic advisors you put on your fundraising deck, but also look for advisors who can get tactical, who can get their hands dirty, who can dive deep into your, Google Ads campaign setup or like talk track and give very specific feedback you can execute right away when you need it. Right. And they need to play that up and down and rather than only staying on that high level. I would also say that revenue leaders should consider engaging with advisors themselves rather than expecting that to be reserved for the founders only. If you're taking on a new role, it does help to get a second opinion or extra trusted hands to help expedite your onboarding, right? To solve a particular issue if you need it, to show the quick wins. And of course, that's like, a bit self-serving but like I truly think revenue leaders deserve better support and shouldn't be expected to know everything and to figure out everything by themselves.
We're seeing that be a big trend, and that was a great call out. And yeah, so it's almost like opening up the aperture to a different type of advisor, that maybe they're not the retired exec, maybe they're still, deep in digital marketing, or they're deep in revenue ops, and you need that right now, and maybe you can't afford that person. Bring them in, give them some equity, and then put them to work. I think in that case, like SLAs are super important. Be just very clear with like, hey, here's how much we're going to talk. There's going to be some projects, so that everyone's on the same page. But I like that. Final question, which is supposed to come out with a silver bullet, but we both know that there's no silver bullets. But people are looking for things that are working today. It's tough out there. What's one go-to-market tactic or strategy that's actually working today for any of the companies that you're involved in?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for influencer strategy for B2B companies. Like influencers are historically used in B2C scenarios, right? It's natural for a fitness instructor to rave about a new juice or yoga pants. But for B2B, there hasn't been a commonly accepted model to work with influencers, right? For many years, because the endorsement is attached to the person's reputation, right? Because there hasn't always been a natural way to compensate them like a B2B influencers. And because it's hard to find them. It's mostly from the founder's existing network. It's hard to scale, volume is low, and it's hard to measure because B2B have longer sales cycles and multiple touch points along the way. So like it can how can you attribute that influence along a longer journey? But despite all the challenges, I've seen influencer strategy working very well for some of my clients. One specific strategy, depending on which level and seniority of the influencer, the alternative incentive to make it work. For example, like the way to compensate the B2B influencers or advocates is not necessarily monetary, like the B2C, but access. Right? Access to founder or executive team, access to beta product, access to an exclusive community of peers with nice events. And that is what I've seen that people are able to make it work. Another strategy is to find influencers on new emerging channels like TikTok, which is underutilized for B2B and still very affordable, or Partner Stack, right? Or like smaller private Slacks. And you need to define your own version of the influencer strategy and how that works. But when it works, I've seen it working really, really well.
I love it. Something I think a lot about, and it seems to be having a moment with the companies that you work with. You called out attribution's tough in this. Like, are you suggesting that founders look at this as a way to truly drive demand and like accelerate deal velocity, or would you put it more in brand awareness, thought leadership, maybe very kind of top of funnel? How should folks just be thinking about it? Because if you go in with the wrong perception of like, this is going to close us deals, and you pay someone X amount, or you give them all this access and it doesn't immediately happen, you might, throw out the baby with the bathwater a little bit?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I would draw the parallel to your paid media strategy, right? Like your paid media, you have top of funnel, awareness driven, LinkedIn, Facebook campaigns, and you have your Google search campaigns that convert those leads. So I would consider, let's say, a TikTok, YouTube, influencer strategy like a top of funnel. It's like you're getting people to be aware of you, to actually check out your website, and to know about you. Some of that traffic will convert if you are more of a PLG product, but a lot of that traffic will not convert right away. But you want to cookie them, right? You want to retarget them, and you can convert them like at a later date. But you do want to capture that touch point. And then you have your endorsements or advocates at the almost like a conversion moment or nurture moments where they can talk about your product on like as a reference, or they can they can talk about your products as a reference and help with the closing. um, or it can be like a conference which has influence into your pipeline, just like your page strategy. So I would say like architected in different levels, just like any other like growth strategy.
I like that way of thinking about it. I think that's the correct way to think about it, and I'm excited to see that evolve. I think it's going to be a big part of a lot of marketing programs moving forward. It just makes sense, right? You using your example of like the fitness influencer, promoting juice. Well, like juice costs $5. Some of these software enterprise platforms, the influencer only has to have an effect on one deal. If your ACV is, 50K or even 15K, just the economics of B2B influencer just makes so much more sense. But Holly, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I always enjoy our chats, and I leave with a page of notes every time. And I'm very excited to hang out next time I'm down in SF. I have to get another trip on the books.
Thank you so much for having me. I had tons of fun.
And for all our listeners, thanks for lending us your eardrums. I always say it, but listening is one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully this inspires you to take some of these tactics, strategies, ways of thinking, apply them to your business. And we will see you all next week.